I'm 97 years old, and if there is one thing I wish someone had forced me to understand when I was younger, it's this. The habit that slowly destroyed my health never felt dangerous while I was doing it. It felt normal. It felt productive. It even felt responsible. That's what made it so deadly. I didn't ruin my body with alcohol. I didn't destroy it with cigarettes. I didn't live recklessly. In fact, if you had looked at my life from the outside, you would have said I was disciplined. I worked hard. I provided for my family. I stayed out of trouble. I did everything society praises a man for doing. And yet, little by little, year after year, I was breaking myself down. The habit was simple. I sat too much, and I ignored my body while doing it. At first, it didn't seem like a problem. I had a job that required long hours at a desk. Back then, that was considered success. Clean work, stable income, no physical strain. I would sit for hours, focused, barely moving, telling myself I was building a future. When I got home, I would sit again. Dinner, then television, then sleep. And the next day, I did it all over again. There was no pain in the beginning. That's the trick. Nothing warns you when the damage is still small. Your body is quiet. It adapts. It compensates. So you assume everything is fine. Years passed, then decades. In my 40s, I started feeling stiffness in my back. Nothing serious, just discomfort. I ignored it. In my 50s, my energy dropped. I thought it was just age. In my 60s, my doctor started mentioning things: blood pressure, circulation, weight. He spoke calmly, but I didn't feel urgency. After all, I wasn't sick. I was just aging. That's the lie I believed for most of my life, that decline is natural, inevitable, and unrelated to the small things we repeat every day. It wasn't until much later that I realized what had been happening all along. My body wasn't failing suddenly. It had been deteriorating quietly, consistently, predictably, because of a habit I repeated for hours every single day without question. Sitting became my default state. Movement became something optional, and over time, optional things disappear. I lost strength without noticing. I lost flexibility without caring. My circulation weakened. My metabolism slowed. My posture collapsed. And by the time the consequences became undeniable, they were no longer easy to reverse. That's the part no one tells you. The damage doesn't arrive like a storm. It arrives like dust, so fine, so subtle that you don't see it accumulating until one day everything feels heavier, slower, harder. If you are listening to me now, don't make the same mistake I did. Don't assume that what feels harmless today is harmless in the long run, because the most dangerous habits are not the ones that hurt immediately. They are the ones that feel invisible until they aren't. By the time I began to truly understand what I had done to my body, the pattern was already deeply ingrained. And that is something you need to understand clearly. Habits do not just affect your body, they reshape your identity. I no longer saw myself as someone who moved. I saw myself as someone who worked, someone who sat, someone who rested. Movement became something extra, something unnecessary, something I would get to later. But later in life is a dangerous place. Many things never returned from there. In my younger years, there were opportunities, small moments where I could have chosen differently. I remember walking past a park on my way home, seeing men my age jogging or stretching, and I would think, I should start doing that. But then another voice would answer, "You're tired. You've done enough for today." And I listened to that voice every single time, not because it was loud, but because it was reasonable. That's how these habits trap you. They don't sound destructive. They sound logical. What I didn't realize was that every time I chose comfort over movement, I was casting a vote for the kind of body I would live in later. Not tomorrow, not next week, but decades ahead. And those votes were adding up quietly, just like interest in a bank account, except this was a debt I didn't know I was accumulating. In my 50s, I started noticing that simple tasks required more effort. Climbing stairs left me slightly breathless. Standing for long periods made my lower back ache. I adjusted my life around it. I took elevators instead of stairs. I sat whenever I could. I reduced effort without realizing that effort was the very thing my body needed to stay alive and capable. This is where the real damage happens, not when something hurts, but when you start organizing your life to avoid discomfort. Because the less you move, the less your body believes it needs to maintain strength. And the body is efficient, it will not keep what you do not use. Muscles began to weaken, not suddenly, but steadily. My legs lost power. My core lost stability. My posture bent forward slightly, then more noticeably over time. At first, I thought it was just getting older, but now I understand. It was disuse. It was neglect disguised as normal aging. Then came the deeper issues. My circulation slowed. I remember my doctor explaining that prolonged sitting affects blood flow, that it places strain on the heart over time, that it increases the risk of conditions I never thought would apply to me. I nodded, but I didn't feel it. And if you don't feel the danger, you don't change. That's another truth you need to hear. Knowledge is not enough. I knew movement was important. Everyone does. But knowing something intellectually is not the same as respecting it through action. And I didn't respect it, not enough to change my daily routine. In my 60s, recovery became slower. If I strained my back, it lingered. If I felt fatigue, it stayed longer than it used to. My body was no longer bouncing back, it was accumulating wear. And yet, even then, I didn't connect it fully to my lifestyle. I blamed time. I blamed age. I blamed everything except the one thing I was doing every single day. Sitting had become invisible to me. It wasn't a choice anymore. It was the background of my life. And that is the most dangerous stage of any harmful habit, when it no longer feels like a decision. I want you to picture this clearly. Imagine spending 8, 10, even 12 hours a day in a position your body was never designed to maintain for that long. Your hips remain closed. Your spine compresses. Your muscles stay inactive. Your blood flow slows. And you repeat this, not for days or months, but for years, decades. Do you see how this isn't just a small issue? It's a long-term structural problem. By the time I reached my 70s, the consequences were no longer subtle. Walking long distances became difficult. Balance was not as stable. I had to think before I moved, and that's when fear enters, when your body is no longer something you trust. I remember one moment clearly. I was trying to stand up after sitting for a long time, and there was a hesitation, just a second, but it was enough for me to notice. My body didn't respond instantly. It needed time. That had never happened before, and in that moment I felt something I had never felt in my youth: uncertainty in my own physical ability. That's when the realization began to form, not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, like everything else in this story. I started to see that my body wasn't betraying me. It was reflecting me, reflecting decades of stillness, of postponing movement, of choosing convenience over strength. And the hardest part to accept was this: there was no single day I could point to and say, this is when it all went wrong. Because nothing went wrong in a day. It went wrong in thousands of ordinary days. By the time I reached my 80s, the truth was no longer something I could ignore or explain away. It was no longer a theory, no longer a quiet suspicion. It was reality, lived and felt in every movement I made or struggled to make. My body had become the record of my habits, and it was an honest record. It did not exaggerate, and it did not lie. What shocked me the most was not the weakness itself, but how deeply it affected everything else. When your body slows down, your world becomes smaller. You don't go as far. You don't stay as long. You don't say yes as often. Gradually, your life begins to shrink, not because you want it to, but because your body can no longer support the life you once had. I began declining invitations, not because I didn't care, but because I knew the effort it would take. A short walk felt long. Standing conversations became uncomfortable. Even simple outings required planning. And when your life starts revolving around managing discomfort, something inside you changes. You become cautious. You hesitate. You withdraw. This is the part no one warns you about. They talk about disease. They talk about weight. They talk about numbers, blood pressure, cholesterol, all of that. But they don't talk enough about loss of freedom. And that, to me, was the most painful consequence of all. I wasn't bedridden. I wasn't critically ill. But I wasn't fully alive either. I was limited. And those limitations came not from a single event, but from years of neglecting something as simple as movement. I remember visiting a man not much younger than me. He was in his late 70s at the time. He stood up straight, walked confidently, moved without hesitation. We spoke for a while, and I asked him what he did differently. His answer was simple: I never stopped moving. That sentence stayed with me. It bothered me because I realized how far I had drifted from that principle. I had spent most of my life believing that movement was something you did when you had time, when you felt like it, when it was convenient. But for him, movement was not optional. It was part of his identity. And that is the difference. At that age, I tried to change. I really did. I began walking more, slowly at first. I tried to stretch. I tried to rebuild what I had lost. And something interesting happened. My body responded, not like it would have when I was younger, but it responded. There was improvement, small, but real. And that's when another realization hit me, one that was both encouraging and painful. The body is incredibly forgiving, but only up to a point. Yes, I could regain some strength. Yes, I could improve my mobility, but I could not return to what I had never maintained. There were limitations that had become permanent. Years of inactivity had reshaped my posture, weakened my foundation, and reduced my resilience. I wasn't starting from zero, I was starting from a deficit. If I had understood this earlier, I would have treated movement differently. I wouldn't have seen it as exercise. I would have seen it as maintenance, as survival, as something as essential as eating or sleeping, because that's what it is. You don't wait until your teeth fall out to start brushing them. You don't wait until your body collapses to start moving. But that's exactly what I did. I waited until the consequences were undeniable, and by then I was no longer preventing damage. I was managing it. Let me be very clear with you. The habit that quietly destroyed my health was not dramatic. It didn't look like self-destruction. It looked like normal life, sitting at work, sitting at home, resting more than moving, choosing comfort again and again until comfort became a cage. And the most dangerous part is this: you will not feel it happening. There is no alarm, no sudden warning. Your body will adapt, adjust, compensate. It will keep going even as it weakens. And that is why so many people like me don't realize the cost until much later. Now, at 97, I move slowly, but I move, not because it is easy, but because I finally understand what is at stake. Every step I take now feels different. It carries awareness, it carries intention, something I wish I had much earlier. If you are younger than me, and you are, you still have something I no longer have in the same way: time to build, not just repair. And that is everything. If you remember nothing else from what I've said, remember this: the habit that quietly destroyed my health was not extreme, not rare, not dramatic. It was simply the absence of movement repeated over a lifetime. And because it felt normal, I never questioned it. That is why it was so powerful. At 97, you begin to see life differently. You stop looking at things in days or weeks. You see patterns. You see what compounds. You see what lasts. And I can tell you with complete certainty, your daily physical habits will shape your future more than almost anything else you do. Not your intentions, not your knowledge, your habits. I used to believe that as long as I wasn't doing anything obviously harmful, I was safe. I thought danger came from extremes, from excess, from bad decisions, from recklessness. But that's not how it works. The greatest damage often comes from what you do consistently without thinking. Sitting felt harmless, resting felt earned, avoiding discomfort felt logical. But over time, those choices added up. They slowly reduced my strength, my mobility, my independence. Not in a way that scared me at first, but in a way that slowly reshaped what I was capable of. And by the time I truly understood it, I was no longer deciding my future. I was living with the results of my past. So let me give you something simple, not complicated advice, not a long list. Just one principle I wish I had followed. Do not let stillness become your default. Move even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. Because the days you choose comfort over movement are the days that quietly shape your limitations later. You don't need to become an athlete. You don't need perfection, but you do need consistency. Your body is designed to move, and if you don't use it, it will take that ability away from you, slowly, quietly, without asking for your permission. And one day you will notice. You will notice when standing up takes more effort than it should, when walking feels heavier, when your body hesitates instead of responds. And in that moment, you will realize that what you thought was just aging was something else entirely, something preventable. I am not telling you this to frighten you. I am telling you this because you still have time, time to choose differently, time to build a body that supports your life instead of limiting it. If I could go back, I would not wait for motivation. I would not wait for the right time. I would treat movement as a non negotiable part of my day, like eating, like breathing. Small actions repeated daily without excuse, because that is how both damage and strength are built, quietly. And if my 97 years have taught me anything, it's this: the future does not arrive suddenly. It is constructed piece by piece through what you do every single day. So look at your day. Look at how much you sit. Look at how often you move. And ask yourself honestly, if I keep living like this, where will it lead me? I already know the answer. And now, so do you.